My name is Art Galloon. I am a proud member of the Board of Directors of Dubuque County Right to Life. Thank you. I know that because I get to wear my metallic pin once a year here. It's like having a pin you get in second grade. You don't get to wear it very often, but I like to wear it here. It's great to look out again at our 27th annual Dubuque County Right to Life dinner and see so many pro-lifers. Isn't it great to come together at least once a year and see everyone you know? Who support all the great things that we're trying to do at Dubuque County Right to Life. A couple thank yous before we get started. First of all, Judy Buntmeyer. Where'd Judy go? There she is, for our music, playing the piano and the guitar earlier. And I see Mitzi Yordi. There she is. I thought you wouldn't want me to single you out, Mitzi, but you like it, don't you? Okay. Mitzi Yordi and her staff here at the Grand River Center do a great job every year, and we're very thankful for that. Well, tonight you're going to hear from three lawyers, and I only have an hour to talk before Marty and Tom talk, so just kidding. On your table, to shorten our program, please look at your program on the back side. It will tell you some of the things Dubuque County Right to Life has been doing in the last period of time since last year's dinner. It's all because of your generosity that we can do these things, be in the schools, give seminars, presentations, hand out free literature to people, and continue to educate. That's what we do. That's what we do with your help. And so we're very grateful for that. Also, there are bumper stickers that are free to take. Ashley, is that right? Where are you, Ashley? Are the bumper stickers free, or do they just pay me? Okay, those are free. So please take those. You'd be surprised. We travel a fair amount, and we're always deciding whether we should leave a bumper sticker on or not. But I think for the most part, they're a quick little educational thing that'll make someone think. And it's sort of like Mother Teresa said, "What are you afraid of? It's just a baby. It's just a baby. What are you afraid of?" So when we have youngsters on here that make people think beyond the time when they might be considering abortion about what the future might hold, they're little thought provokers. So if you're inclined to have one of those and have them on your vehicle, please do that. Okay, one other thought. Shannon Lundgren, who's a state representative from our area and has been battling in the State House for several years on the 20-week abortion ban, the fetal heartbeat bill. She would have been here tonight with Charlie and her family, but the legislature in Des Moines is still in session, so she couldn't make it. She asked me to say hello to everybody and know that her prayers are with us for a successful event tonight. And we miss Shannon and wish her well in the rest of the legislative session. So, I'd like to introduce our speakers. St. Thomas More died about 484 years ago. And he was a very brave, and I'm proud to say, lawyer who defied Henry VIII because he would not take the supremacy oath, and he was beheaded. In honor of him, the Thomas More Society was founded by this gentleman to my left in 1997. His name is Tom Brejcha, and he's here as president and chief counsel for the Thomas More Society based in Chicago, with senior counsel Martin Cannon, who will be up here in a few minutes, and I'd like to just tell you a little bit about both of them. Tom is a Notre Dame grad, grew up in south side of Chicago, eventually went into the service, served in Vietnam, won a Bronze Star and an Army Commendation Medal, went to law school, continued his practice in Chicago, and became a business litigator, arguing very complex cases, some that went to the United States Supreme Court. In 1986, I want to say, he got involved for free representing a man named Joe Scheidler, who some of you may know, from the Pro-Life Action League in Chicago, and defended Joe and his family when they were sued by the National Organization for Women. And Tom took that case on and shepherded that case and that defense because they had accused Joe of violating the RICO statute, the Racketeering Corrupt Influence Organizations Act. And that case took decades, and at one point, Tom's partners said, I'm going to find this here because you need to know who these guys are. They said, Tom, you've got to quit that case or quit the firm. So guess what Tom did? He quit the firm and defended Joe Scheidler all the way to the Supreme Court where they won, you bet. Where they won a decision 8-0. I think one of the justices was sick, or it would have been 9-0, and kicked the National Organization of Women, who was very pro-abortion and trying to stop Joe Scheidler and his peaceful sidewalk protesters in Chicago. So that started what has now been Tom's 22-year journey as the President and Chief Counsel for the Thomas More Society, traveling the country, defending religious freedom, First Amendment rights, pro-life people like you who are really out there without help unless somebody like Tom Brejcha or Martin Cannon defends them. And they've been doing it with support and help from people like us for many, many years. Now, Tom and Martin know that this isn't a Thomas More Society fundraiser, but they do have a table in the back where they have information and literature. They're a great, great organization, and we're so happy and proud to have them here. Martin Cannon, who will be up to speak after Tom, is an Iowan. And Martin has a big connection to the Dubuque area and to the state of Iowa in his pro-life work. Martin's specialty is defending pro-lifers and picketers who prayerfully picket and have their First Amendment rights trounced on by Planned Parenthood and others who want to keep them from educating women in crisis pregnancies about the positive pro-life answers to their crisis. And Martin has done great work in Iowa. He also helped them write the 20-week abortion ban bill, the fetal heartbeat bill. When that had to be defended in front of the Iowa Supreme Court, it wasn't the Attorney General of the state of Iowa, our own Dubuque area Tom Miller up there defending it. It was Martin Cannon. Martin was here when Planned Parenthood left the building that now our friends at the Clarity Clinic occupy, and when Planned Parenthood left thousands of patient records there, Martin came up to help us with that effort and what we should do in that situation. So our two warrior lawyers who are here tonight, we should be so proud of, because they are America's pro-life warrior lawyers. Say that 10 times as fast as you can, but that's who they are. Yes, thank you. So Tom is telling me to get off the stage because he's too humble, and I could talk. His wife, Debbie, they've been married for quite a long time. She said, there's a lot of things that I'd like you to tell the group about Tom, but I won't do that tonight. Tom is going to have a few remarks about what they've been doing nationally to help the pro-life movement and fend off the pro-abortion folks, slings and arrows to David DeLyden and others, and then Martin will come up and give us an update on what's going on in Iowa and other places. So please, Tom Brejcha, President and Chief Counsel for Thomas More Society, to be followed by Martin Cannon, Senior Counsel.
Wow, thank you very much, Art. Some of what he said was true. He's a lawyer. You know, I'm thrilled to be back in Dubuque, and I'm a little bit over the hill these days. I was here, I think, in the 1940s, and I grew up in Chicago, and my parents, I saw the railroad tracks. I don't know what railroad it was, but I think we came here on an outing from Chicago, and I had great memories, and I was looking forward so much to coming. I thought I wouldn't be able to come because we were scheduled for a 2-week evidentiary hearing in one of my least favorite cities. I used to like it, but San Francisco, in front of Judge Height in Superior Felony Court, where our client DeLyden and his helper Sandra Merritt were to go on a preliminary hearing to see whether there was enough evidence to make them stand for a jury trial on 15 felony charges that they engaged as investigative journalists in unconsented recording in violation of the anti-recording law in California. No person, no journalist has ever been charged with violation of that statute in California. Only Daleiden and Sandra Merritt. Well, you might say, well, nobody may have done what they did. Well, every week, those of you who have spent time in Los Angeles would know on KCBS there's an undercover reporter who does repeated stings, sting journalism. He goes in undercover to visit, for example, a chiropractor who was allegedly, and indeed he had him on tape doing it, taking money for handicap parking permits. He went into an auto repair shop where repeatedly this fellow had charged folks for repairs that were totally unnecessary. Why was our client singled out? Well, you don't have to guess. It was because he, as many of you may have seen on his websites, the Center for Medical Progress, he caught the abortionists in moments of candor where they admitted a terrible willingness to commit what we can only regard as human atrocities. And I don't want to be too candid about what he found and what's on those tapes. And I'm also under a federal gag order. Some of them are not covered by the gag order, and those you can see now on the internet, and I urge you to do so. The more the truth of what abortion is really about comes out, the quicker I think we're going to see the kind of change in this country that we have been hoping and praying for ever since the late 1960s and 1973. To start on a very positive note, so how did I get here? Because miracles do happen, and they happen as we live now on this earth. Last Friday, we'd been hurriedly preparing for 2 weeks of cross-examining the abortionist witnesses. We had expert witnesses. The defenses to Daleiden's charges were that you could not reasonably expect not to be overheard in those conversations that were alleged to be confidential. But they were also that he would be privileged to engage in that kind of investigative undercover journalism if, in fact, he believed in good faith that he would find evidence that violent felonies were being performed against human beings, human persons. And we have evidence to present to Judge Haidt, and we were ready to do it with expert testimony and actual witnesses that indeed he had eyewitness and expert testimony to believe indeed that's what he would discover. And I can only say that we would have been able to present evidence that he did discover such horrible things going on, and such things as, well, you know, I hesitate to say. I don't want to say it at this august meeting, especially with young people present. But babies were born with beating hearts, let me put it that way. And the candid statement by the governor of Virginia that so many of us saw and were shocked at hearing was a revelation of that truth that's so often concealed, that indeed babies are born alive and what happens to them. And now we find that indeed the abortion industry has been promoting infanticide. And if that baby is unwanted somehow, in their view, it doesn't count as a human being entitled to live even after he or she is born. Those facts need to be dwelled on, publicized, shouted to the heavens. They are human atrocities. They are crimes against humanity. I think the more that we can point them out, the better. I think we shouldn't be reticent about it. And we were ready to present this evidence in open court and to explain it to the press. But what they did in that case was do everything they could to hamstring and silence us, to put us in a straitjacket, things we couldn't say. And yet we have in this country a constitutional right to a public trial, to confront, cross-examine your accusers, to let the public know what's going on in the criminal process. The other side went so far as to try and intervene in the case. And by the other side, I don't mean the Attorney General of California who brought the charges, but I mean Planned Parenthood itself. Its lawyer and the lawyer for the National Abortion Federation tried to intervene, came into the criminal court and said, "Judge, we need to be heard." Their pretext was a California law called Marsy's Law, where crime victims have the right to be heard in criminal cases, but it's a limited right. It's a right to be heard about bond if they're in danger, that the bond should be high, that the defendant may pose a threat to them, or it's to be heard at sentencing, but not to be heard in open court, to be standing next to the prosecutor as if a co-prosecution were at stake. So what was the miracle? The miracle was our co-counsel, I give them credit, a young woman down in Orlando, Florida, hurried up while we were preparing witnesses and evidence. She did a marvelous thing and got all the paperwork together, and I must tell you it's a huge amount, and got filed in the Supreme Court of California an emergency motion to stay the preliminary hearing until they could hear an appeal on a narrow issue. And by gosh, it was 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which of course is 4 p.m. California time, just about the time when everything on Good Friday, believe it or not, was about to shut down. Word came from the California Supreme Court Chief Justice that an immediate stay would be granted. And that's why I'm allowed to be here. It was a miracle, and indeed, that gave us time to complete our petition for rehearing, which we filed last night at a late hour. And if I yawn a little bit later tonight, I apologize. I think we're in a position now to put a brick on that prosecution, as we did a couple of years ago when he was charged along with Sandra in Texas. But listen, let me move on, because the featured speaker tonight is our heavy artillery at the Thomas More Society. His name is Cannon. Martin comes from Western Iowa. I got to know him. He was famous in Omaha, where we have a co-headquarters office. Martin was a founding member of the Coalition for Life of Iowa. He took the lead on defense of your heartbeat statute on behalf of the state of Iowa. We were honored to be asked to do so, and unfortunately, your Supreme Court got ahead of us. In a prior case, it ruled somehow you have a right of abortion in your state constitution. That decision is nothing short of an abomination, legally speaking. I'm not speaking just morally or politically. And that Supreme Court should be held accountable by you, the voters in Iowa. I hope that progress will be made in that regard. Just briefly, what do we do at Thomas More Society? Well, let me just say, when my partner said, quit the case or quit the firm, you know, it was not a bad position for them to take, because these cases are cases you don't settle. And the pro-life movement is kind of not exactly a great fee-paying client, you know, and yet a law firm needs to make some money. So I don't blame them at all. I think it probably was one of the best things ever to happen to me. But I want to just introduce the person who came with me from Chicago, who was responsible for standing up in that case. My wife, Debbie. Please stand, Deborah, will you? Let me tell you, she's the real boss of the Thomas More Society. I went home and told her I'd resigned, and she said, Tom, you go back tomorrow and unresign. We had a son going to college, of course, you know, but it turned out great. Why? Because nonprofit entities are what the pro-life movement needs. That's the way to spread the burden around. Otherwise, because when we fight these cases, we want to fight them aggressively. We don't want to settle unless it's on our terms. We don't want to concede the lives of any unborn infants. We don't want anybody to have to back off from pushing the pro-life message, which needs to be pushed to the skies and without any backing off whatsoever. So we fight them all the way. We take when we lose, we appeal. We don't win everything, but when we lose, we try and make up for it by going on offense later on in the same area. One of the things we've worked for Lila Rose, we've worked for Population Research Institute. We're defending the administration now against the states that are suing to enjoin Title 10, the defunding of Planned Parenthood. The Justice Department asked us to help out with amicus briefs. We're in New York, and that was Brother Cannon. Brother Cannon went out to New York and beat the Attorney General of New York and knocked him silly. And so Iowa packs a wallop around this country, let me tell you, when it's Cannon that's doing the litigating. One case I want to tell you about, because one of the things we do, and I have helpers who are good corporate lawyers, tax lawyers, is you remember the Internal Revenue scandal. Well, one of those key cases came right out of Cedar Rapids. And there's a lady named Sue Martinick, and I'm thrilled to say I met her again tonight. She's here. Her pro-life group was told they wouldn't get a tax exemption as a charity unless every director of her group signed a sworn statement they would no longer protest at Planned Parenthood. Can you believe that? That's how screwed up the Internal Revenue Service was. And yes, Lois Lerner probably should have been prosecuted, but at least we got rid of her, and the case was made that the Internal Revenue was so horribly biased under the prior administration and Lois Lerner. And I'm very happy to say we got an invitation for Sue to appear before the House Ways and Means Committee in Congress, and I was there with her. Sue, stand up and let people give you recognition for what happened. Anyway, I can't see her. But listen, I've got to stop here so that you can hear from our heavy artillery. But let me tell you, it's been an honor to represent pro-life people around the country, whether it's in California or New York or anywhere else, but especially Iowa. My grandparents are buried here in Iowa. My ancestors, I think they migrated east with the livestock to Chicago. But in any event, thank you so much for the invitation, and what a great gathering this is, and proof that the pro-life movement is alive and well, and are we going to prevail? But anyway, Martin, come on in here and bring it home.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for being here. Art didn't tell you that I almost didn't make it. I drove over from Omaha, just this side of Omaha, western Iowa, leaving early this morning. I got about 10 minutes from home, and I noticed I didn't have my cell phone. But I thought, well, that's not a big deal. I can live without it. I got past Des Moines almost to Iowa City, and I had to stop for gas with less than a quarter tank left. And when I went for my wallet, I realized it was with my cell phone. No ID, no credit cards, no money, no phone, no gas. That's a fairly alarming situation to be in. You have to think about things you never thought about before. But I went to 2 or 3 different places, and eventually I went to a bank in a very nice town in Iowa I discovered, Brooklyn, Iowa, with a very nice bank full of very nice people. And we got the thing worked out, and I got some cash, and I went on my way. As I drove away from that bank, and then further along up Highway 1, seeing the beautiful countryside, beautiful barns with the stone foundations, I thought, what a beautiful place is our country and our state, and what lovely people it's full of. There is great reason for optimism. But the biggest reason for optimism is that not everything is perfect, not everything is good. There is a lot of evil afoot, but we will not be fooled. A group of this size, this caliber, with this leadership, this organization, in order to maximize its already significant impact, sometimes has to stop and look around at the changes in our culture and respond to them. What do we make of the time that we are in? And what do you do while you're in it? There was a time when liberals and conservatives, Democrats and Republicans shared a common understanding of history and a common respect for our foundational principles. There was a time when they had the same ends in mind, differing mostly in the approach to achieving them. There was a time when our legislative bodies were truly deliberative bodies. That was a time when the tradesman could put down his tools, the professor could put down her papers, they could go to the polling place and cast a vote, go back home and pick them up again, confident that people in fundamental agreement could kick things around, discuss things, and work things out. That time is gone. A couple of months ago, many of you might have seen, and all of you should see, the 45-minute speech given by Senator Susan Collins explaining her vote for Justice Kavanaugh. She's a Republican, but not the most conservative. Her vote was in doubt. Her speech was a little tremulous. It was utterly even-tempered. It was beautiful in its substance, unassailable in its logic, and astounding for its rarity. Today, legislatures are less deliberative and more mathematical. It's all about the seats. Why is that? It's because we don't have a common understanding of our history. We don't have a common respect for our principles. And most importantly, we don't have the same ends. There are many examples in every issue, but abortion is as good an example as any. We've gone from safe, legal, and rare to it's just health care. We've gone from life of the mother to health of the mother to abortion at any time for any reason. At one time, the law was an accepted principle and a controlling process, but now the principle is just in the way, and the process is abused. Lawlessness exists in the highest of places. Now, you heard Tom talk a little bit about the Daleiden case. And of course, that's a hard case. It's an interesting case, but its defining feature is that people in power are abusing this man because he ticked off the wrong people. It is lawlessness. The New York case that Tom talked about is another example. In that case, let me back up just a little bit. The Federal FACE Act, the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, makes it a crime by physical obstruction or violence or threat to block an abortion clinic. It specifically exempts from its provisions the kind of sidewalk counseling that we've all come to know, that is protected by the First Amendment. It specifically exempts it. But the Attorney General of the state of New York, a darling of the abortion industry, filed a lawsuit against our people out there doing two brazen things. First, he accused our clients of doing things his own evidence did not support. And he tried to take garden variety sidewalk counseling out of the protected category and make it a violation instead. It was a brazen thing. It was a lawless thing. If he'd have succeeded, sidewalk counseling nationwide would have been virtually shut down. But after a lengthy and expensive trial, a very good federal judge said to him, in effect, in a 103-page ruling, your witnesses don't tell the truth and your arguments stink. It was an absolute smackdown. In the midst of that, some of you might remember that he was also a darling of the Me Too movement until a funny thing happened. He was exposed as a really twisted fellow who badly mistreats women. Within a few hours of the exposure, he resigned. People during that case always came up to me and said, "What effect does this have on your New York case?" I said, "It really doesn't have any effect, but it sheds light." As he did in appeasing the abortion industry, and as he did in pretending to be a poster boy for the Me Too movement, what he showed us is that the people on the hard left, certainly Eric Schneiderman, say things because it makes happy the people who keep them in power, and not because it's true. That bears on the lawlessness that we're seeing in high places. And of course, a lot is going on in Iowa, and we need to talk a lot about that. You kind of have to start at the beginning to know what has happened to you, and you must leave tonight knowing what has happened to you. All of us for many years, not just with Justice Kavanaugh, but other justices before him, have seen this play out, this frenzied kill the man with the ball that happens every time a seat is empty. And while that's going on, we hear all about whether a justice is judicially liberal or judicially conservative. And to the average guy on the street, what does that mean? Well, an easy answer is the judicially conservative justice strictly construes the Constitution. The judicially, and that sounds cranky, doesn't it? Kind of draconian. And the judicially liberal justice likes a living Constitution. Doesn't that sound nice? But what does that even mean? The conservative jurist finds in the Constitution only what is written there and leaves it to the people to supply what is missing or to remove what is defective. The liberal jurist who likes a living Constitution says, you know, that's a bad idea. Constitutions are old documents. We need to find new and evolving truths in them. that reflect or respond to issues we face today that we think are also new. We need to respect the evolving sentiments of the people, and we, the courts, need to step in once in a while and tweak the Constitution to bring it up to date so it matches those sentiments. By doing that, they say, we keep the Constitution living. It is an utterly flawed idea. It is favored by people who prefer government by the judiciary to the boisterous marketplace of the State House. The people of Iowa have held 3 constitutional conventions. This is our second constitution. It's relatively new. It's been around for 160 years. In that 160 years, and by the way, it contains 2 methods for its own amendment, and each of them gives that power only to the people. In the 160 years we've had this Constitution, the people of Iowa have amended it on 27 different occasions, as recently as 2010, and in 48 different ways. The Iowa Constitution is not an old document. It is a current document kept living by the people of Iowa. So what about the heartbeat bill? The heartbeat bill is morally right. It is legally consistent with many other things. It is the will of the people. And very importantly, it is not an improper compromise. It does not foreclose or delay or trade off personhood or life at conception bills. In fact, it accelerates them. But we had barely begun to defend it when the Iowa Supreme Court made a ruling that under the Iowa Constitution, there is a fundamental right to abortion. And that's not just flowery language. In legal terms, fundamental rights are very, very seriously protected. They're like your First Amendment right, or your Second Amendment, your Fourth, your Fifth. They are fundamental, and they are almost beyond regulation. They found that the right to abortion under Iowa's Constitution was greater than the Supreme Court of the United States found in Roe versus Wade. The Iowa court said, forget what Roe says. We understand that Roe gave a woman a right to an abortion, but Roe has been losing ground for many years. We aren't going to be bound by the federal jurisprudence on abortion. We have the right to interpret our own Constitution, and we'll jealously guard it. And then they did. They found this fundamental right. It doesn't just take us back to Roe, it takes us back further. In a stroke of a pen, the Iowa Supreme Court took us from arguably the most pro-life state in the country to the most abortion-friendly. Everything you've all worked for years and years and years, is in jeopardy. They didn't just throw out the 72-hour rule, 72-hour provision in the 20-week bill. They cost us the heartbeat bill, and every other pro-life law existing right now, whether it's defunding or regulation of abortion clinics or anything else, is absolutely in jeopardy. What the court said, never mind that there is nothing in the Iowa Constitution about abortion. The court said, the Iowa court said, we think it needs to be there, therefore it is. And you need to understand the chicanery in that. This Iowa Constitution, when it was passed 160 years ago, through the actions of the Iowa legislature, preceded by only a few months, another action by that same legislature banning abortion, except to save the life of the mother. There was no credible argument then, and there isn't any now, that the Iowa Constitution contains that right. This Iowa Supreme Court didn't care. The ruling exposes its own flaws. If it's really true that current sentiments are as the court said they are, can it really be imagined that some properly authorized action by the public that supposedly has these sentiments could be very far behind? And of course, the other problem is it pretty plainly isn't the sentiments of the people. The best evidence of the sentiments of the people is the heartbeat bill. It's passed through 2 houses after contentious debate and signed by the executive. The Iowa Supreme Court's ruling is another case of lawlessness in high places. But there is a great reason for optimism. It's really twofold. Number one, we all hear about the 3 branches of government. Nobody ever points out that they're only branches. Each branch gets all of its authority and is ultimately accountable to you. That's the people. The other reason for optimism is something really very magical that's happening. When Roe versus Wade came down 45 years ago, I would venture to say, and I do remember it, most people were horrified. Many of the people, probably most of the people who were horrified then, have grown complacent or acquiescent in it. To people who do not live and breathe an issue, they take their cues about what's right and wrong from what is legal. How much worse should it be then for 2 or 3 generations of kids who've grown up since Roe, knowing nothing but Roe, never knowing of a time when abortion was illegal? Shouldn't they be more complacent than even the acquiescent grown-ups? And yet go out to the March for Life in D.C. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of people attend that thing. The numbers are huge. I believe I saw a pretty decent contingent from Dubuque. But the striking thing is that of those hundreds of thousands of people, easily 3/4 of them are younger than Roe. The sanction of the Supreme Court has been matched by your message. That's huge. That's what you do. It's why you're winning and why you'll continue to win. And I should add, those young people are not just young. They're well-informed, they're articulate, they are full of energy, and they are not to be denied. How did that happen? This wound on our civility that is abortion would have scabbed over and faded from the public consciousness 40 years ago, except for people like you who would not sit down and shut up like you were supposed to. You've kept the matter on the front pages, on the op-ed pages, on the billboards, on Facebook. You've kept abortion as a litmus test for politicians and justices. And you've had your effect. The sanction of abortion, the sanction of legality has been overpowered by you. And I should add, and we know this, The more the issue gets discussed, the more we win. Truth has power, and we see the truth of the humanity of the child more and more all the time. Going forward, just to maintain what you're doing and have done so effectively for years, you're going to need your coffers full. But all the more so because of a new and necessary challenge that I submit you should embrace. Heartbeat bills are showing up everywhere. What happened in Iowa is unique to Iowa and should not be viewed, and isn't being viewed, as a reason other states shouldn't adopt them. The Supreme Court of the United States may very well reverse Roe, and when it does, it doesn't just order that abortion is legal, it sends the debate back to the state legislatures and probably later to the federal legislature. Very importantly, the states may at that point very broadly proscribe abortion. And when that time comes, Iowa, the most pro-life state in the country, will be unable to participate. Your Iowa court took that away from you. It was an utter usurpation of your right to self-governance, of your right to be the authors of your Constitution. Like the kid who owns the ball but doesn't like the way the game is going. They just picked it up and ran away with it. You need to chase them down and take it back. There's a move afoot in the Iowa State House to amend Iowa's Constitution. It's already gotten a lot of traction, a lot of favor with a lot of legislators. I hate to call it an amendment because it doesn't amend the Constitution. I like to call it the Stay the Same Amendment. All it says is that right to abortion doesn't exist in the Constitution. It doesn't say we can never have abortion or that we shall have abortion. It just takes the matter out of the hands of the court and puts it in the hands of the people where it belongs. Legislators, understandably enough at this point, are a little bit tepid. They understand that they might not have the support of the people to pass the amendment, which they have to do. And they also understand that if they pass the amendment, it has to go back to the people to be ratified. And if there's not popular support for it, it's not going to go anywhere. There's already a great deal of support for it. Not enough. There has got to be more. We need to crisscross the state, speaking, and we need people for this, speaking to every county central committee, every conservative group, every pro-life group on campuses. I'll be speaking to 2 of them tomorrow, one in college kids on Central College's campus, and then tomorrow, later in the day, the Iowa Federation of Republican Women. We need to cover the state with this. We need to have speakers. We need billboards. We need Twitter feeds. We need Facebook. We need op-ed pages. We need to win some races. We need your manpower, your organization. And if you embrace this task, you will need a lot of money. Look at the great accomplishments that have affected world history. They don't stay in their effect, and they wind up having to be repeated. There are a lot of examples. I'm thinking right now of Ronald Reagan, who through steadfastness and unabashed adherence to principle helped bring about the political, military, economic downfall of the Soviet Union. Look at Russia today. It is resurgent. We cannot rest on the achievements that others accomplished in their times. Each of you must make a difference in yours. The biggest challenge you have, the greatest affront to your beliefs and the work you've been doing, is this Supreme Court. The most important task you can embrace tomorrow is to take your governance back. The Iowa Coalition of Pro-Life Leaders is launching a well-organized and well-grounded effort to accomplish this amendment. And like I said, amendments are not easy, but this Iowa Constitution's been amended a bunch of times. It is perfectly doable. It just needs people to get involved, spend some money, spend some time, and it'll happen. Your Planned Parenthood clinic closed down a few years ago, but Planned Parenthood didn't close it. You did. The Iowa Constitution will be amended, but it will not be amended by the Supreme Court. It won't even be amended by the legislature. It will be amended only by you, and you very much need to do it. Thank you very much.